The gardens of Serenity bloomed with flowers that sang in the morning breeze. Wren walked through the crystal pathways, her translucent blue skin catching the soft light of the twin suns. She had never seen a weapon in her 300 years of life, and the concept of violence was as foreign to her as breathing underwater. The Aldorian Republic had evolved beyond such primitive behaviors long ago. Her peaceful morning ended when the emergency beacon pierced the air with its haunting melody. Wren's large eyes widened as she rushed to the communication center, where dozens of her fellow Aldorians gathered around holographic displays. The images they showed were beyond anything their civilization had ever experienced. Commander Vel stood at the center of the room, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "The outer colony of Haven has gone silent," he announced, his voice trembling. "The last transmission showed ships unlike anything in our databases." The hologram flickered to life, displaying the final moments of Haven Colony. Massive, dark. Vessels shaped like predatory beasts descended from the sky. They bristled with strange protrusions that flashed with deadly light. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled under streams of energy. Aldorians ran in terror, their graceful forms stumbling in panic. "Who are they?" Wren whispered. "They call themselves the Krogar Empire," Vel replied. "Our exploration ships encountered them 3 systems away. They demanded our immediate surrender. When our captains tried to negotiate, the Krogar opened fire without warning." The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the translation devices. The Aldorians had no word for genocide in their language. They were learning new concepts at a terrible pace. More reports flooded in throughout the day. Crystal Falls Colony had been attacked next. The Krogar ships moved with military precision, surrounding worlds and delivering ultimatums. Surrender, or face destruction. When the Aldorians tried to evacuate civilians, the Krogar targeted the rescue ships first. Wren found herself assigned to the defense fleet, though the name was misleading. Their ships were designed for exploration and rescue operations. They carried powerful shields, advanced medical facilities, and cargo holds filled with supplies for humanitarian missions. What they did not carry were weapons. The first engagement was a disaster. Commander Vel led 12 ships to defend the mining world of New Terra. The Krogar met them with 30 vessels that looked like they were built for nothing but war. The Aldorian ships tried to use their shields to protect the evacuation transports below. It lasted exactly 17 minutes. Wren watched from her sensor station as Krogar weapons tore through their shields like paper. The energy beams were designed not just to destroy, but to cause maximum suffering. Ships didn't explode cleanly. They burned slowly, giving crews time to send desperate final messages home. Only 3 Aldorian ships escaped. Vel was not among the survivors. The High Council convened an emergency session. Elder Val, the oldest and wisest of their leaders, looked every one of his 800 years as he addressed the assembly. "We face extinction," he said simply. "Our philosophy of peace has served us well for millennia, but we are not equipped for this kind of enemy." "Perhaps we can reason with them," suggested Councillor Yin. "Surely they must want something we can provide without violence." The answer came in the form of intercepted Krogar communications. Their language was harsh and guttural, filled with concepts the Aldorian translators struggled to process. The Krogar didn't want territory or resources. They wanted slaves. They viewed the Aldorians as weak, pathetic creatures suitable only for manual labor or entertainment. Elder Val made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Send out a distress call to every known civilization in the galaxy. We need help." The responses were disappointing. The Zephyrian Federation was too far away to provide meaningful assistance. The Crystal Empire was already dealing with their own Krogar invasion. The merchant guilds offered to evacuate Aldorian leadership for a price, but couldn't spare military vessels. Most civilizations didn't respond at all. Then came a message from an unexpected source. The signal originated from a small blue planet in a system so remote that most galactic maps didn't include it. The transmission was crude by Aldorian standards, barely managing to achieve real-time communication across the vast distances. "This is Earth Command responding to your distress call," the message began. The voice was strange, speaking a language the translators had never encountered. "We understand you're facing an aggressive enemy. We're prepared to provide assistance, sending aid immediately." Ren stared at the display showing Earth's location. "But they're barely spacefaring," she said to her colleague Ren. "Our sensors show they only achieved faster-than-light travel recently. What kind of aid could they possibly offer?" Elder Val studied the star charts with growing puzzlement. "Perhaps they have advanced defensive technologies," he suggested hopefully. "Some civilizations develop protection before they develop exploration." 3 days later, their questions were partially answered when sensors detected an approaching vessel. It emerged from hyperspace with the distinctive energy signature of a jump drive, but something was different about its design. Where Aldorian, ships were elegant curves and flowing lines. This vessel was all angles and sharp edges. It looked crude, almost primitive. But as it drew closer, Ren began to notice details that made her uneasy. The ship's hull was scarred and pitted, as if it had seen extensive use in dangerous conditions. Strange protrusions dotted its surface, and energy readings suggested multiple active systems of unknown purpose. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The hologram showed a being unlike any in the Aldorian databases. The human was shorter than an Aldorian, with strange mottled skin and small eyes that seemed to be constantly scanning for threats. Most disturbing were the visible scars that marked his face and hands. "This is Captain Brooks of the Earth vessel. Indomitable," the human said, "requesting permission to dock with your station. We need to talk." Elder Val granted permission, though Ren noticed his hands trembling slightly. There was something about these humans that felt dangerous, even through a hologram. As the human ship approached the docking bay, Ren couldn't shake the feeling that they had just invited a predator into their peaceful world. The ship moved with purpose and precision, its pilot clearly experienced in complex maneuvers. The Aldorians had spent millennia learning to create beauty and pursue knowledge. These humans, Ren realized with growing certainty, had spent their time learning something else entirely, something that might be exactly what the Aldorian Republic needed to survive. The docking bay fell silent as the human ship settled into place with mechanical precision. Ren watched from the observation deck as steam vented from the vessel's hull, creating an ominous fog around its base. Elder Val had assembled the High Council for this unprecedented meeting, though none of them knew what to expect from these strange beings from Earth. The airlock opened with a sharp hiss, and the first human stepped onto Aldorian soil. Captain Brooks moved with controlled purpose, his eyes constantly scanning the environment. Behind him came 3 other humans, each carrying equipment the Aldorians couldn't identify. They wore dark uniforms that seemed designed for durability rather than beauty. Elder Val stepped forward, his ceremonial robes flowing gracefully around his tall frame. "Welcome to Serenity, Captain Brooks. We are grateful for your response to our call for aid." Brooks studied the elder with intense eyes, taking in details that most beings would miss. "You're taller than our intelligence suggested," he said bluntly. "That's useful information. Your people built these corridors wide and high, which means we can move heavy equipment through them if needed." The Aldorians exchanged confused glances. This wasn't how diplomatic meetings usually began. The human gestured to his companions. "This is Lieutenant Ryan, my tactical officer. Dr. Stone handles alien biology and psychology. Sergeant Mills is our weapons specialist." The word weapons caused several Aldorians to step back involuntarily. They had no equivalent rank in their society. Elder Val led the group to the council chamber, a beautiful dome where sunlight filtered through crystal walls to create dancing patterns of light. The humans seemed unimpressed by the artistry, instead examining sightlines and structural supports. "Tell us about your enemy," Brooks said without preamble as they settled around the conference table. "We need complete tactical information." "The Krogar Empire appeared 3 weeks ago," Elder Val began. "They are reptilian beings, larger and stronger than us. Their ships carry weapons of tremendous power. We attempted to communicate, but they seem interested only in conquest." Dr. Stone leaned forward. "Show us everything you have on them. Combat footage, technical specifications, communication intercepts, everything." The Aldorians activated their holographic displays, showing the devastating attacks on their colonies. As the images played, Ren watched the humans' faces carefully. Where she expected to see horror or sympathy, she found only cold analysis. "Crude but effective," Lieutenant Ryan muttered as Krogar ships destroyed Aldorian vessels. "They're using overwhelming firepower against targets that can't fight back. Classic intimidation tactics. Their ship designs suggest a warrior culture," added Dr. Stone. "Notice the predatory shapes, the prominent weapon emplacements. They want their enemies to be afraid before the fighting even starts." Captain Brooks paused the display during footage of Krogar ground forces. "These soldiers, how do they behave toward prisoners?" Elder Val's skin darkened with distress. "They take slaves from among our population. The rest—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "They execute non-useful captives," Brooks stated matter-of-factly. "Standard procedure for a conquest-focused military. No resources wasted on feeding useless mouths." The casual way he discussed such horrors made Ren's skin crawl. These humans spoke of atrocities as if they were discussing weather patterns. "You mentioned your people have no weapons," Brooks continued. "What about planetary defenses, orbital platforms, military installations?" "We have none of those things," Elder Val admitted. "The Aldorian Republic has been at peace for over 3,000 years. We eliminated warfare from our society long ago." The humans stared at him in disbelief. "You've never fought a war?" Lieutenant Ryan asked incredulously. "We evolved beyond such primitive behaviors," Elder Val replied with fading pride. Sergeant Mills laughed harshly. "Evolved beyond them? Ma'am, respectfully, you evolved into prey." Dr. Stone activated a portable device, projecting images from Earth's history. The Aldorians gasped as they saw scenes of human conflict spanning millennia. Armies clashing with primitive weapons, cities burning under aerial bombardment, spacecraft engaging in deadly combat among the stars. "This is what we call Tuesday on Earth," Brooks said grimly. "Humans have been fighting wars since we discovered fire. We've gotten very good at it. But surely your people prefer peace," Elder Val protested weakly. "Of course we prefer peace," Brooks replied. "But we understand that sometimes peace has to be won through strength. Your Krogar friends have made it clear they're not interested in negotiation." The humans spent the next several hours reviewing Aldorian technology and defensive capabilities. Their questions were precise and focused, revealing a deep understanding of military logistics that made the Aldorians uncomfortable. "Your ships have excellent shields and sensors," Dr. Stone observed. "With modifications, they could serve as effective platforms for weapon systems." "We cannot arm our vessels," Counselor Yin objected. "It goes against everything we believe." Brooks fixed her with a steady stare. "Your beliefs won't stop Krogar energy beams from killing your people. You called us for help. This is what help looks like." The debate continued through the night. The Aldorians struggled with concepts they had never needed to consider. Acceptable. Losses, strategic retreats, collateral damage. The humans explained each term with clinical precision, as if discussing routine procedures. Finally, Elder Val raised his hand for silence. "If we agree to your assistance, what exactly are you proposing?" Captain Brooks stood and walked to the holographic display, calling up tactical projections. First, we arm your ships and train your crews in basic combat maneuvers. Second, we coordinate a joint defense of your remaining colonies. Third, we take the fight to the Krogar before they can consolidate their gains. Take the fight to them? Wren asked in shock. The best defense is a good offense, Lieutenant Ryan explained. These Krogar have never faced serious resistance. They're bullies who prey on the weak. Time to show them what happens when you pick on someone who can fight back. Elder Val looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. Fear and desperation warred with deeply held convictions about the nature of civilization. Outside, reports continued to arrive of Krogar attacks on outlying settlements. You're asking us to become something we're not, Elder Val said quietly. No, Brooks replied. We're asking you to become something you need to be if you want to survive. The vote was close, but desperation won. By a margin of 3 votes, the High Council authorized human military assistance to the Aldorian Republic. As the meeting ended, Wren approached Captain Brooks privately. Your people, she said hesitantly. Are you always so comfortable with violence? Brooks considered the question carefully. Comfortable isn't the right word. We're experienced with it. There's a difference. He paused at the chamber door. Your people built a beautiful civilization here. Art, music, philosophy. We're going to help you keep it. But understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. War changes everyone it touches. As the humans departed to begin their preparations, Wren wondered if saving their civilization might require destroying what made it worth saving in the first place. Serenity's orbital shipyards had never seen anything like the controlled chaos that erupted over the following weeks. Wren stood on the observation platform, watching human engineers swarm over Aldorian vessels like insects on a carcass. The graceful curves of their exploration ships were being fitted with angular weapon pods and armor plating that destroyed their elegant lines. The transformation extended far beyond the ships. Admiral Fox had arrived with the main human fleet, bringing 30 warships that made the Indomitable look small by comparison. The Admiral was a stern woman with graying hair and eyes that seemed to calculate the cost of everything in lives and resources. Your people learn quickly, she told Elder Val during a strategy briefing. But learning to fight isn't just about pressing triggers and following orders. You have to change how you think. The first combat training session was a disaster. Lieutenant Ryan had assembled 50 volunteer Aldorians in what used to be an art gallery. The beautiful sculptures had been moved to storage, replaced by tactical displays and weapon simulators. Combat is about making your enemy react to you instead of the other way around, Ryan explained. You want them confused, frightened, making mistakes while you stay calm and focused? An Aldorian named Ben raised his hand. But surely we should try to minimize suffering on both sides? The room fell silent. Ryan looked at the alien with something approaching pity. Ben, right? Let me explain something. The Krogar see your mercy as weakness. Every time you hesitate to pull the trigger, more of your people die. Every time you try to minimize their casualties, they use that against you. He activated a holographic display showing Krogar tactical doctrine. See this? They put their command, ships behind their expendable vessels. They use civilian populations as shields. They torture prisoners specifically to demoralize enemy forces. These aren't misguided enemies who can be reasoned with. They're predators. Dr. Stone stood up from her position at the back of the room. We've completed our psychological analysis of intercepted Krogar communications. Their entire culture is built around the concept of strength dominating weakness. They literally cannot comprehend mercy except as a character flaw to be exploited. For us home. Training continued with basic weapons handling. The Aldorians struggled with the concept of pointing deadly devices at living beings, even in simulation. Their hands shook as they tried to operate targeting systems. Many couldn't bring themselves to press the firing controls at all. "This isn't working," Sergeant Mills muttered to Captain Brooks. "They're too peaceful. It's like trying to teach flowers how to bite." But Brooks had noticed something the others missed. A few Aldorians were adapting faster than the rest. Wren was one of them. She had watched her homeworld burn, seen friends die in Krogar attacks. The grief was changing her, hardening something that had been soft her entire life. "Focus on the ones who can learn," Brooks advised. "Train them hard, then have them train the others. Sometimes peer instruction works better than outsider pressure." The breakthrough came when news arrived that the Krogar had attacked the agricultural world of Harvest. The colony supplied food for 3 other systems. Its loss would mean slow starvation for millions of Aldorians. Wren volunteered to lead the rescue mission. Her ship, the Mercy's Grace, had been transformed from a medical vessel into something the humans called a missile frigate. The sleek, medical bays were now filled with launch tubes for guided projectiles. The peaceful crew quarters housed Marines trained in boarding actions. The journey to Harvest took 2 days. During that time, Wren studied human tactical manuals with obsessive intensity. She learned about flanking maneuvers, suppressing fire, and something called aggressive negotiation that seemed to involve shooting first and asking questions later. The Krogar were still in orbit when they arrived, loading captured Aldorians onto slave transports. Their ships were arranged in a loose formation, confident that no real threat could emerge from the supposedly helpless prey species. "Mercy's Grace to all units," Wren broadcast on the tactical frequency. "Begin the dance." The phrase came from human training. Combat was a dance where partners tried to kill each other, and the most graceful dancer was the one who stayed alive. Wren's ship emerged from hyperspace behind the Krogar formation, weapons already armed and targeting systems locked. Before the enemy could react, 20 guided missiles streaked toward their largest vessel. The Krogar ship's shields flared and failed under the concentrated bombardment. But Wren had learned more than weapons handling from the humans. She had learned deception. While the Krogar focused on her surprise attack, 3 more Aldorian ships dropped out of hyperspace in different positions. The enemy found themselves surrounded by opponents who no longer behaved like victims. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, 4 Krogar ships were destroyed, and 2 more were limping toward the system's edge with critical damage. The Aldorian losses were minimal, 1 ship with moderate hull damage and 3 casualties who would recover fully. More importantly, they had rescued nearly 2,000 prisoners from the slave transports. Admiral Fox reviewed the battle recordings with undisguised approval. Textbook application of concentration of force and tactical surprise. Who planned this operation? "I did," Wren admitted, surprised by her own words. The Admiral studied her with new interest. "You're a natural. Have you considered advanced tactical training?" Within days, Wren found herself aboard Fox's flagship, learning concepts that would have horrified her weeks earlier. Strategic bombing, psychological warfare, the deliberate targeting of enemy supply lines to create maximum disruption. "War isn't about fighting fair," Fox explained during a late-night strategy session. "It's about winning as quickly and efficiently as possible. Every day the conflict continues. More people die on both sides." The transformation was spreading throughout Aldorian society. Factories that once produced art supplies now manufactured armor plating. Musicians composed battle hymns instead of love songs. Children played games involving tactical movement and cover positions. Not everyone approved of the changes. Counselor. Yin led a growing faction that argued they were losing their souls in the effort to save their bodies. "Look what we've become," she pleaded during a heated council session. "We carry weapons. We plan attacks. We celebrate the destruction of enemy vessels. Are we still Aldorians? Or have we become something else entirely?" Elder Val, looking older than his 800 years, struggled with the same question. "Perhaps," he said slowly, We were never meant to remain children forever. The debate was interrupted by urgent communications from the frontier. Krogar reinforcements were massing for a major offensive. Intelligence suggested they were bringing their entire reserve fleet to crush the unexpectedly resistant Aldorians once and for all. "How many ships?" Admiral Fox asked. 200, came the grim reply. "Maybe more." The council chamber fell silent. Even with human assistance, the combined Allied fleet numbered less than 60 vessels. Fox smiled grimly. "Good. Let them come." Wren stared at the Admiral in shock. "Good? How is that good?" "Because," Fox replied, "they're bringing their entire fleet to one location. That means we won't have to hunt them down one by one." The Admiral activated the strategic display, showing the Aldorian home system with its 3 moons and defensive platforms. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "let me introduce you to the concept of a killing field." 3 days before the Krogar fleet arrived, Serenity looked like a world preparing for evacuation. Civilian transports moved in obvious patterns between the planet and its outer moons, loaded with what appeared to be fleeing refugees. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels with panicked reports of defensive failures and collapsing morale. It was all an elaborate lie. Wren floated in the command center of her ship, now designated the New Dawn, watching the deception unfold with professional satisfaction. The fleeing transports were actually moving weapons and supplies to concealed positions. The panicked broadcasts were carefully scripted to make the Krogar believe their psychological warfare was working perfectly. "Enemy fleet detected at jump point 7, announced her sensor operator, an Aldorian named Tom who had learned to read tactical displays with remarkable skill. 237 vessels. They're maintaining standard formation. Admiral..." Fox's voice crackled over the command frequency from her hidden position behind Serenity's largest moon. "All units, this is Control. Remember, we're scared prey animals running in panic. Don't break character until I give the word." The Krogar fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark storm cloud, their ships arranged in the classic intimidation formation that had terrorized dozens of worlds. War Commander Grath's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Bone Crusher, led the advance with weapons already charging. Wren watched the enemy approach through her ship's sensors, fighting every instinct the humans had trained into her. The New Dawn was hidden in the shadow of a communications satellite, its power signature masked and weapons offline. Around the system, 59 other Allied vessels waited in similarly concealed positions. "Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship," Tom reported. The holographic display flickered to life, showing War Commander Grath in all his reptilian fury. The Krogar leader was enormous even by his species' standards, covered in battle scars that spoke of countless victories. His eyes burned with the confidence of a predator who had never met an equal opponent. "Pathetic Aldorians," Grath snarled in his harsh language. "We offer you one final chance. Surrender now and some of you will live as slaves. Continue this foolish resistance and we will hunt down every last one of your kind." Elder Val's response came from the planet's surface, his voice carefully modulated to sound desperate and defeated. "Great War Commander, we are prepared to discuss terms. But our fleet requires time to stand down their weapons systems. Please, give us 1 hour to prepare for surrender." Grath's laughter was like grinding stone. 1 hour? You think to buy time for evacuation? Very well. We will use this time to demonstrate what awaits those who defy the Krogar Empire. The transmission ended, and Wren felt her blood run cold as she realized what was about to happen. The Krogar weren't going to wait. They were going to use the hour to terrorize the civilian population, broadcasting the slaughter to break any remaining resistance. "Control, this is New Dawn," she whispered into her communicator. "They're moving toward the planet. We have to act now." "Negative." Fox's voice was like ice. "Hold position. Trust the plan." Wren watched in horror as Krogar, Ships descended toward Serenity's upper atmosphere, energy weapons beginning to glow with lethal charge. On the planet's surface, millions of Aldorians waited in underground shelters, trusting their military to protect them. The first Krogar energy beam lanced down toward the capital city and struck nothing but empty air. The entire city flickered and vanished, revealed as an elaborate holographic projection. In its place stood a massive defensive platform bristling with human-designed weapons. Similar illusions collapsed across the planet's surface as hidden installations revealed themselves. Now, that, Fox's voice carried grim satisfaction, is what we call a surprise. The defensive platforms opened fire simultaneously, sending streams of coherent energy toward the now confused Krogar fleet. But this was only the beginning of the trap. All units, this is control. Execute hammer strike. Repeat, execute hammer. Strike! Ren felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as her ship's systems came online. Around the system, 60 Allied vessels dropped their concealment and began moving toward predetermined attack positions. The fleeing transport ships revealed themselves as disguised missile platforms, their cargo holds opening to disgorge clouds of guided projectiles. War Commander Grath's roar of rage echoed across the communication channels as he realized the extent of the deception. All ships, attack formation! Destroy these insects! But the Krogar fleet was no longer fighting confused prey. They were trapped in a carefully planned kill zone, with enemies attacking from multiple directions using tactics they had never encountered. Ren's ship emerged from behind its satellite and immediately engaged the nearest Krogar vessel. The New Dawn's weapons had been upgraded with human targeting systems that could track multiple enemies simultaneously. Her crew, trained in human combat doctrine, worked with mechanical precision to deliver maximum damage. Target their engines. First, she commanded, remembering her lessons. Crippled ships can't maneuver. Unmaneuverable ships are easy kills. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Aldorian history. Their ships no longer fled from superior firepower. Instead, they used speed and coordination to outfight enemies that relied on brute force. When Krogar vessels tried to use their standard intimidation tactics, they found themselves facing opponents who had learned not to be afraid. Captain Brooks, commanding a mixed squadron of human and Aldorian ships, demonstrated the principle of acceptable losses when his damaged destroyer rammed a Krogar battlecruiser. Both ships were destroyed in the collision, but the explosion took out 2 additional enemy vessels that had been using the battlecruiser as cover. That's how you turn 1 loss into 3 kills, Lieutenant Ryan commented grimly as he watched. The tactical display. The Krogar fleet, designed for overwhelming weaker opponents, began to collapse under coordinated pressure. Their ships were powerful but predictable. Their tactics were effective against civilians but useless against trained opponents who fought back with equal ferocity. War Commander Grath, watching his supposedly invincible fleet being systematically destroyed, made a fatal error. He ordered his remaining ships to concentrate their fire on the human vessels, believing that eliminating the military advisors would cause Aldorian resistance to collapse. Instead, he gave Admiral Fox exactly the opening she had been waiting for. All Aldorian units, this is control. The enemy has revealed their primary formation. Execute final dance. The final dance was a maneuver that would have been impossible for the peaceful Aldorians just months earlier. It required perfect timing, absolute trust in one's allies, and a willingness to accept casualties for strategic advantage. 30 Aldorian ships converged on the Krogar formation from multiple vectors, their weapons firing in carefully coordinated patterns. They didn't try to destroy every enemy ship. Instead, they targeted specific vessels whose destruction would create gaps in the Krogar defensive formation. The tactic worked perfectly. As key ships exploded, the enemy formation collapsed into chaos. Individual Krogar vessels found themselves isolated and surrounded, easy prey for the smaller but more maneuverable Allied ships. In desperation, Grath tried to rally his remaining forces for a retreat. But Admiral Fox had anticipated this as well. Human ships that had remained hidden throughout the battle now emerged from hyperspace behind the Krogar fleet, cutting off their escape route. The retreat became a rout. Of the 237 Krogar ships that had entered the system with such confidence, fewer than 20 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured, their crews either dead or prisoner. War Commander Grath's flagship was among the survivors, but barely. The Bone Crusher limped toward the system's edge with critical damage, carrying terrifying reports about humanity's military capabilities back to the Krogar High Command. As the battle ended, Wren found herself floating in the command center of her ship, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. They had won, not just survived, but actually defeated the Krogar Empire's main fleet in open combat. Around her, the crew celebrated with quiet satisfaction. They had learned to fight like humans, but they were still Eldorians at heart. Their victory was measured, not in enemy deaths, but in friends and family who would live to see another day. All ships, this is control. Admiral Fox's voice carried quiet pride. Well done, people. You've just changed the balance of power in this galaxy. 6 months after the Battle of Serenity, the galaxy had learned to speak humanity's name with respect and fear. Wren stood in the rebuilt command center of her flagship, now called the Liberator, watching Allied forces prepare for what might be the final assault on Krogar space. The war that had begun with a desperate call for help was ending with the hunter becoming the hunted. The transformation was complete. Eldorian ships no longer resembled the elegant exploration vessels they had once been. They were weapons of war, scarred by battle and bristling with human-designed armaments. More importantly, their crews had become something their ancestors would not recognize. Soldiers capable of calculated violence in service of a greater good. Final intelligence report coming in, announced Commander Ben, who had evolved from the frightened volunteer in early training sessions into one of their most capable tactical officers. Emperor Morg's home fleet is massing at their capital world, 300 ships including their newest dreadnoughts. Admiral Fox studied the holographic display with the patient intensity of a chess master examining a complex position. The past months had aged her visibly, but her strategic mind remained sharp as a blade. They're making their last stand, she observed. Everything they have left in one final battle. Elder Val, now bearing the scars of his own transformation from peaceful philosopher to wartime leader, joined the briefing via holographic link from the Eldorian High Council chambers. Our intelligence agents report massive civilian evacuations from the Krogar homeworld. They're afraid. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The species that had built their empire on fear now cowered before the combined might of humans and Eldorians who had learned to think like predators. Good, Admiral Fox said with cold satisfaction. Fear makes them predictable. Desperate enemies make mistakes. But Wren found herself troubled by the casual way they now discussed the terror of their enemies. When had she become someone who found satisfaction in others' fear? When had the gentle Eldorian who once tended singing flowers become a warrior? Who calculated the best methods of psychological warfare? The answer came with painful clarity. The moment she had watched her homeworld burn and decided that survival mattered more than moral purity. 3 days later, the combined fleet emerged. From hyperspace at the edge of Krogar space, 200 Allied vessels, evenly split between human and Eldorian commands, faced off against the remnants of an empire that had once seemed invincible. Emperor Morg's voice crackled across the communication channels, speaking in the heavily accented galactic standard that his translators struggled to render properly. So the prey comes to the predator's den. You have won battles, but this is our home. Here we fight with the fury of the cornered beast. Admiral Fox's response was delivered with the same clinical detachment she had shown throughout the campaign. Emperor Morg, you are offered terms: complete withdrawal from all occupied systems, reparations for damages, and submission to galactic war crimes tribunals. Refuse, and we will remove your government by force. Morg's laughter was harsh and bitter. You offer us slavery disguised as mercy. We choose death with honor. The battle that followed was different from all the others. The Krogar fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat meant the end of their empire. Their ships pressed. Attacks that bordered on suicidal, ramming Allied vessels when their weapons failed. But desperation could not overcome the fundamental transformation that had occurred. The Allied forces no longer relied on superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had learned to fight smarter, using tactics that turned Krogar strengths into weaknesses. Ren led a squadron of modified Aldorian cruisers against the Emperor's personal guard. These were the elite of Krogar military forces, veterans of dozens of conquered worlds. But as their massive ships lumbered forward with traditional intimidation tactics, Ren's forces demonstrated lessons learned from months of human training. Scatter. Formation, she commanded. Make them choose targets while we concentrate fire. The Aldorian ships broke apart like dancers, each moving in carefully choreographed patterns that confused Krogar targeting systems. While the enemy tried to track multiple fast-moving targets, the Allied forces focused their combined firepower on individual Krogar vessels, destroying them one by one. It was systematic, efficient, and utterly ruthless. The tide turned when Captain Brooks, commanding the human battleship Retribution, broke through the Krogar defensive line and engaged Emperor Morg's flagship directly. The two massive vessels exchanged devastating broadsides at point-blank range, their shields flaring and failing under concentrated bombardment. "This is Brooks to all units," the captain's voice carried across the tactical network, strained but determined. "The Emperor's ship is crippled, moving in for boarding action." What followed was the final demonstration that the galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. Human Marines, supported by Aldorian soldiers who had learned to fight in close quarters, stormed through the corridors of the Krogar flagship. Room by room, deck by deck, they overcame defenders who had never faced enemies capable of matching their physical prowess while exceeding their tactical skill. Emperor Morg was found in his command chamber, surrounded by the bodies of his personal guard. The ancient Krogar ruler was wounded but alive, his reptilian eyes still burning with defiant pride. "You have won," he said simply, as human and Aldorian soldiers secured the area. "But understand what you have done. You have taught the galaxy that might makes right. You have shown peaceful species that survival requires the willingness to kill." Admiral Fox, who had come aboard to personally accept the surrender, studied the Emperor with clinical interest. "We didn't teach the galaxy that lesson. You did when you started conquering defenseless worlds. We just taught them how to respond." The formal surrender ceremony took place 3 days later aboard the Aldorian flagship Serenity's Hope. Representatives from dozens of worlds that had suffered under Krogar occupation watched as Emperor Morg signed documents that dissolved his empire and placed its remnants under Allied military governance. Elder Val, now wearing the military uniform that had become standard for Aldorian leadership, read the terms with formal precision. "The Krogar Empire hereby agrees to complete withdrawal from all occupied territories, payment of reparations to victim populations, and submission to galactic justice for war crimes committed during the occupation period." But the real ceremony took place later in private, as the Allied fleet prepared to return home. Ren found herself alone with Admiral Fox in the observation deck of the human flagship, watching Krogar vessels being escorted away under heavy guard. "We won," Ren said quietly. "So why don't I feel victorious?" Fox was silent for a long moment, her weathered face reflecting years of similar victories. Because you're smart enough to understand the cost. Your people saved themselves, but they're not the same species they were 6 months ago. Through the viewport, they could see Aldorian ships returning to their home systems. The vessels that had once carried artists and philosophers now transported soldiers and weapons specialists. The beings who had evolved beyond warfare were now among the galaxy's most effective military forces. Was it worth it? Ren asked. Ask me in 100 years, Fox replied, when we see what kind of civilization your people build with their new knowledge. The human fleet departed for Earth the following week, leaving behind a galaxy that had learned hard lessons about strength and survival. The Aldorian Republic remained, but it was no longer a peaceful civilization devoted purely to art and philosophy. They had built schools for strategic studies alongside their universities. They maintained a standing military force that could respond to threats anywhere in their territory. Most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the price of preserving civilization was accepting that civilization itself must change. Elder Val stood in his private chambers, looking out at the rebuilt capital city of Serenity. Construction crews worked around the clock to repair damage from the war, but the new buildings included features that would have been unthinkable before. Hardened communication centers, underground shelters, and defensive emplacements disguised as art installations. A message arrived from the frontier, where Aldorian military forces were establishing permanent bases to guard against future threats. The report was routine, professional, and would have been incomprehensible to Aldorians just a year earlier. Defensive positions established, patrol schedules implemented, all sectors secure. Val closed his eyes and remembered the gardens that had once sung in the morning breeze, tended by beings who had never known the weight of weapons or the burden of necessary violence. Those gardens still existed, but they were guarded now by soldiers who understood that some things were worth fighting for. The price of their survival had been innocence. Whether that price had been worth paying would be judged by future generations who would live free because their ancestors had learned to fight. Outside his window, the twin suns set over a world that was both the same and forever changed. Serenity endured, but it was no longer the naive paradise it had once been. It was something harder, stronger, and perhaps more precious for having been tested in the fire of war. And across the galaxy, other species looked toward human space with new understanding. They had learned that behind Earth's blue skies and peaceful appearance lay a race that had turned the art of war into a science, and the defense of allies into a sacred duty. The humans had kept their promise. They had provided aid when called upon. But in doing so, they had also provided a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Sometimes, the greatest act of friendship is teaching someone how to fight.